Okay, so in this video, we'll be discussing PhilHealth controversies that they had in the last year, especially during the onset of the pandemic. And then, of course, we'll also revisiting some of their past controversies in 2019 where they had, ghost patients. And so I have here 6 online articles. I'm not, anyway, all these articles are mostly based on, allegations being raised by whistleblowers and PhilHealth, former PhilHealth employees and officials. And so Senate hearings have been conducted and investigations have been conducted to check whether these allegations are true or not. Alright. Anyway, these articles were written in 2020, but we're just going to create a commentary on certain specific points that have been delivered in these articles. Alright. So first we have this corruption allegations rocked Philippine Health Insurance Corporation amid COVID-19. So this was in 2020, right? Okay, so essentially, there have been our government agencies and government corporations, government in general has been flagged by corruption allegations over the years, since time immemorial. We don't know when it started, but it's been there, all right? And of course, we Filipinos are concerned because what funds the government are taxpayers' money, so essentially it came from the population, especially the working groups. And what the public wants is that these funds are used for the benefits of the Filipino people as well, especially those who are in need, the less fortunate, those who really needed assistance. And these funds, okay, and in the case of PhilHealth, of course, those you have our senior citizens, we have those that are sick, and we have those that are indigents who are unable to support themselves, who are unable to avail of medical treatments and facilities without the aid of PhilHealth. And so the creation of the PhilHealth and the intention of the universal healthcare law through the PhilHealth is actually very helpful for their situations, for their conditions. Okay, it's a big help. So in a way, it's a very, very good kind of law. But the other concern is that the public doesn't want this money, the funds that we've given to the PhilHealth, to be corrupted, to be used improperly, to be pocketed by certain individuals, and to be the subject of fraud and corruption. Essentially, that's the main point. All right. So we have here certain allegations about the PhilHealth, and especially a lot of this came out last year, 2020, while we are dealing with the pandemic as well. So it's a very crucial time, and to learn that the institution is being tangled with all these issues is a little very concerning. All right. So we have here they have this graphic saying the PhilHealth controversy at a glance, but I'm not actually sure why they included this. PhilHealth contributions in 2019, 151 billion. PhilHealth liabilities in 2019, 111 billion. I'm not sure why they included it, but they should have, what's going on with the contributions, what's going on with the liabilities, why did they include this in this graphic? I don't know. And then we have here the 14 billion, which is the main point of last year's controversy. Total IRM releases, from March 25 to June 9 that were deemed illegal or invalid. IRM stands for, what's this again? Interim Reimbursement Mechanism. So essentially, what PhilHealth did is they passed this resolution. They implemented this certain recommendation to provide advance payments to healthcare providers, hospitals, medical institutions to cater to the pandemic. All right, their needs in relation to the pandemic. Right, so that's the main point of the IRM. But it was deemed illegal or invalid because first off, there are certain issues. The first one is that non-accredited healthcare providers were given IRM advances when they're not accredited by PhilHealth, so why did they receive them? And then the second one is that It's supposed to be for, COVID-related cases, and yet there are certain hospitals, medical institutions, or healthcare providers that were not catering to COVID patients, okay? Or they have, even if they do, they have low cases of COVID. So it's not really, in a way, they don't need that much advance payment for them. So that's the second point. They shouldn't have received that much advance payments. And then the third one is that there are, of course, we have laws. In the previous video, we discussed the IRR and the law regarding PhilHealth. And they do have that portion wherein any medical institution or hospital or healthcare provider the accredited ones, which has been found to have been, committing fraudulent activities like filing benefit claims for dead patients, the so-called ghost patients, or billing PhilHealth for claims that are, at the what we call overpayments, so to speak. Okay? Basically, the deal here is that you have your patient, you cater to them, and of course, the value of service that's been catered to them has, a certain value. And we have all case rates wherein specific diseases or specific illnesses have a limit on how much benefit can be availed by the patients, right, or by the members, PhilHealth members. And yet, of course, not everyone is going to avail the whole amount, because it would depend on their particular medical condition or situation. So it's possible that although the limit set by PhilHealth is 10,000, it's possible that the medical care assistance or what actual service has been provided to them is less than the limit, which is 10,000. It's possible that it's only, let's say, around 5,000 or around 4,000, 6,000. Okay, but what happens is that these certain medical institutions, healthcare providers, what they do is that they bill the patients at the limit provided by PhilHealth. So in a way, that's overpayment. Why are you it's like maximizing the benefits that you can file against PhilHealth, but then it's in a way it's to be seen, it can be seen as fraudulent, because that's not the actual value of the services you've provided to the patient. It's only the maximum amount that you can you can avail for the particular illness, and yet you maximize that, even if it's something like overpricing. The services you rendered is only 5,000, and yet you bill the maximum allowed, which is 10,000. So there are those scenarios, all right? And then the other issue they have is that the interim reimbursement mechanism, taxes were not withheld from those disbursements. Okay, and since PhilHealth is a government agency, it's a government-owned and controlled corporation, so it should have withheld taxes from their disbursement of funds, all right, which they did not do for the IRM, all right. And essentially, so those releases were deemed illegal or invalid, right? So they initiated this project implementation of mechanism in March in response to the pandemic. However, they started operations even before standard operating procedures were approved. So that's why the operations are deemed illegal, and they didn't have clear guidelines as to which healthcare institutions were eligible to receive funding. As stated earlier, even those with pending cases of fraud were given. Forgot to mention, institutions that have pending cases for fraud, in a way, they are frozen from receiving PhilHealth claims or PhilHealth benefits until those pending cases are settled. Okay, they are not qualified to receive benefits from PhilHealth or to file claims against PhilHealth unless those allegations or pending cases are settled, right? And yet they still receive funding from through the IRM, right? So the main issue there is that those certain institutions should not have received funding, and yet they receive. Okay, and then of course there's no SOP on how they're going to liquidate, how long do they have to liquidate the funds, and then how do they return the the excess, because if they don't have COVID cases, or if they have a low number of cases for COVID, then they would not be able to fully utilize the advance payments that they received, in which case they have to return it to PhilHealth, right? So that's essentially the main point of the 14 billion, right? And then what they were trying to say why this is this so-called crime of the year is that in the previous case we have the pork barrel controversy. That particular controversy involved only 10 billion pesos, whereas this one involved 14 to 15 billion pesos. So that's why it's called in a much bigger controversy. And of course, the other one involves, politicians. This one involves PhilHealth. And although, of course, PhilHealth is being funded by contributions from the members, and then it's also being subsidized by the government, counterpart, whatever's collected from the members, the same amount is being provided by the government. And yet, what the government is providing to the PhilHealth is still came from the taxpayers' money, right? So essentially, it's being funded overall by the Filipino people. So they wanted to ensure that these funds are being used properly, efficiently, and for the purpose that they are meant to be used, right? We don't want corruption. We don't want these funds to go into the pockets of certain individuals. And another thing that they raised is in relation to their IT department or acquisition of IT-related resources. Okay, so they bought softwares, laptops, equipment, and what happened was their proposals, the proposed amounts were essentially higher than the amount that has been approved. Like this one, 21 million approved for 168,000, 40 million approved for 25 million, proposed 5 million approved for 500,000. So in a way, who was it again? The official defended this, saying that it was just a proposal. It's not, it's still going to undergo a certain process, and then there's approval, and then what is approved, then that's the amount that's going to be disbursed by the PhilHealth. So essentially, the proposed amount is not actually the amount of money that went out of PhilHealth. So in a way, he's right about that. But still, why is it that you proposed such high amounts of, of value for these ICT equipments, right? So although the official claimed that ICT is a complicated matter, they are not very knowledgeable about it, still they could have, simply asked the ICT to maybe review their proposal, check the prices if it's reasonable enough or are they overpriced, because essentially saying or looking at these figures, we can see that the proposals are really, very much higher than what the equipments were purchased for, right? So that's another thing. Okay, and also they're hoping that with the improvements on the technology side of things for PhilHealth, they would be able to cater to, they would be able to provide their services in a much faster rate. It's going to improve their processing, so that the issuance of the claims, processing of claims, and the disbursement of claims would be much faster than how it was previously, right? Because that would help a lot the medical institutions, the hospitals, and the healthcare providers, so that they also have to provide or fund their own expenses to the hospitals. All right. So those were the items that I've included in this particular article. And then of course, this is last year, 2020, and then before that, in 2019, the universal healthcare law was actually passed in 2019. IR was also spread in 2019, and then almost right after it was passed, there's that allegation on the ghost patients involving dialysis patients. Basically, there's this particular institution which filed claims against PhilHealth amounting to I think it's over 100 billion, right? And then these pertain to dead patients already, Okay, basically before they died, they were, legitimately filing claims for their dialysis sessions. But then, even after these patients have died, this particular healthcare providers continued to file claims for these people, even though they're already dead. Okay, so that's why they have these ghost patients. So, what problems are we seeing here is that on the part of the proposal or on the procurement of the ICT and the implementation of the IRM, so the fault there lies with the management, right, of the PhilHealth itself. But in the case of fraudulent, claims, it would be on the part of the medical institutions, the hospitals, healthcare providers who committed them. Okay, why is it that they had the audacity to file claims for dead patients and to what do you call this, to avail the maximum amount that they can avail, even if that's not the amount or value of the services that they provided to their patients. So I'm not sure if there's greed involved or self-interest, financial interest, but in a way I think we also have to look into the situations of hospitals, medical institutions, and healthcare providers to see what pushes some of them to commit this fraudulent activities. Kinukulang ba sila sa pera? Kinukulang ba sila sa funding? Or is it simply, greed and only for the benefit of certain individuals, these greedy people that, let's just pray for them. Okay, so that's another thing. And then, of course, during this time, of course, we'd like the institution PhilHealth to they call this some sort of probably restructuring or reorganization, and so that they to implement certain changes on how they do things to ensure that these controversies of the past and of the present will no longer, will not happen again in the future, right? Okay. Okay, so the main point is that, of course, we want the people to, again, regain their trust in the institution. In a way, for us, working individuals who are contributing to the fund, we essentially do not have a choice on the matter. We need to contribute because it's mandated, and it's the employer that deducts our contribution, and then they provide a counterpart of the employer. And then, in a way, we do not want to risk it because, although we probably don't need it early in our career because we're healthy, we're doing well, but later on, when we get older, it's possible that we're also going to make claims. We're going to need the benefits provided by PhilHealth. But the question is, at that point in time, would PhilHealth be in a financial situation that would still be able to cater to the needs of the Filipino people? Because essentially they're universal healthcare, they're providing benefits for all the Filipinos, right? So we have to ensure that from today onwards they are properly utilizing the resources, the funds, and not corrupting it, putting it in the pockets of certain individuals or groups, so that the institution could last a long time, supposedly in perpetuity. Because as long as there are contributing members, and they ought to continue operating as well, right? That's one of the main points why they exist. Okay, so next we have this article saying Health Chief's no knowledge claim over PhilHealth controversies and admission of guilt, says Soto. So apparently, Health Chief, which is Duque, claimed that he has no knowledge of the PhilHealth controversies, what they call it, the mafia, the IRM, interim reimbursement mechanism. Soto, who is a senator, claims that you saying that you have no knowledge of it is an admission of guilt, because essentially, as the top official of PhilHealth, you should have, you should know this. You should have overseen the conduct, the operations of PhilHealth, whatever board resolutions are being provided, even if you're a non-voting member. A board resolution should be aware of the board resolutions that have been passed by the board, and of course you should in a way be aware of the situations. It's essentially your responsibility to know what's going on in the institution that you're supposed to safeguard, monitor, or supervise. Okay, you can't just claim that you have no knowledge of it. Okay, it's happening in your organization, you should be aware of it. Okay, so it's ignorance shouldn't excuse. You're being paid to do your job, so you should do your job, right? So anyway, I agree with Soto in this, that it's an admission of guilt. You're guilty of negligence. What did it say here? He's guilty because he's negligent of his duties, essentially. Alright. Okay, any public officer who, by reason of the duties of his office, is accountable for public funds or property, you being the head of this organization, shall appropriate the same, or shall take or misappropriate, or shall consent, or through abandonment or negligence, shall permit any other person to take such public funds or property, wholly or partially, shall be guilty of the misappropriation or malversation of such funds or property. Okay, with regards to the IRM, Duque is claiming that he's not aware of it, he's a non-voting member, and it was the board members who created the resolution and approved it, right? But, you should have known. Okay, these just how bad is your relationship with your board members that they did not inform you of the resolutions that they made. I mean, you should have. Alright. Soto argued, however, that Duque still has the role of supervising PhilHealth's affairs, given it as an untouched agency of the department he heads. Yes. Okay. Questioned the implementation of IRM, noting that the money was distributed to facilities before requirements were completed. The requirements were met by June 11, but the agency already released over 14 billion from March 25. Also found that the funds released exceeded estimated cost for COVID-19 treatment. Okay, it's unforgivable that the Philippines money was being used in such a way. Yes, agree. It's the people's money. Okay, hirap na hirap sila, di makapag-hospital, nasa nilang PhilHealth, pagkatapos malalaman na billion na pera, ginagamit sa ganon, it's unforgivable. Alright, translation, sorry. Okay, so there's still an investigation now. Okay, what I find funny about these news is that during the allegation process, during the allegations, during the hearings, during the investigations, these are being reported, and yet after investigation, where's the report about the results of the investigation? I can't seem to find articles about it. And what's the resolution? What's the solution that they've thought of? How are they going to recover this money? Who's going to be responsible? What kind of punishment are you going to give to them so that they would be held accountable, and so that future leaders of these institutions would not commit the same mistake, because they know that they would be held accountable for their duties. Hello, they're being paid to do their job, so they should be doing their job, right? And then I think another claim made by Duque here is that he has been focusing on his other roles in battling the current health crisis. I mean, that's not an excuse. It's still part of your job. You shouldn't ignore your other responsibilities just because you're busy with something. Alright, you should be able to oversee everything that's going on through the organization that you're supposed to monitor. I mean, you do. I'm pretty sure he has assistants, he has secretaries or whatnot. They should be able to do something that could have, in an organized manner, could have monitored essentially everything that's going on in the Department of Health or in the PhilHealth, right? Okay, PhilHealth officials face 15 billion fraud, other allegations, found funds seem to run out by 2022. So again, the 15 billion fraud refers to the IRM, 14 billion, and then I think the other billion is in relation to the ICT equipment, the overpriced IT resources, they're saying. And then the other allegations, of course, we have the dead patients that are still claiming, and then the undue overpayments of benefits. And then, of course, Duque was also involved in, a conflict of interest because I think a PhilHealth office is being leased from a building owned by his family, so there's that as well. And then, what other things are included? Okay, there are other things, okay? But essentially, the main points are what you've already mentioned. And then another is that funds seem to run out by 2022. Essentially, in their actuarial, they're saying that the funds could still last for about 10 years. But when the pandemic happened, essentially their disbursements for claims for benefits ballooned because of the COVID. And then patients who got the COVID, they essentially their hospital bills are a lot, more than $500,000. Sometimes it goes over $1 million, and so the claims also balloon. And then essentially what the actuarial is saying is that the funds would run out by 2022, drastically being cut drastically short by decreased collections, okay, because of the pandemic as well. Meron tayo a few months where a lot of people were unemployed, who weren't working because of a lot of businesses ceased operations during the lockdowns, and then we have increased payouts due to the COVID pandemic, right? So they expected that by 2021, that's this year, we will be in the red already. What they meant when they say we're in the red already is that the amount of money coming in is less than the amount going out, right? And then they have this, they projected a net operating loss of 90 billion, which is a lot, and then 147 billion in 2021. Again, this article is from 2020. Okay, in their latest articles released this year, they're just saying, what do you call this? Loss in contributions around 40 billion, and then the loss they're expecting because of the deferment of the increase in contribution rates is around 14 billion. Okay. Alright, but again, this was a claim made in 2020 during the pandemic still, and so this was rebutted by Drillon, pointing out that during the first quarter the loss was only about 2 billion. Alright, so the government has the responsibility to keep it afloat. Yes, because in the law which established PhilHealth, it's the solvency of the agency is guaranteed by the government. So if it goes into red, the government has the responsibility to infuse funding to PhilHealth so that it could continue providing benefits to its members, right? And then they asked, without the additional subsidy, PhilHealth will collapse, and Shaggy said yes. This is a personal opinion, but I think that as long as there are people who are greedy, who are only thinking about their, self-enrichment, their own, building their own wealth, and essentially not minding the plight of the Filipino people, those who are supposed to benefit from the funds of these institutions, PhilHealth, SSS, GSIS, PAGNIDU. I think corruption would be very it would be difficult to to eradicate. All right, but we'll see if we will be able to have a leader that will be able to convince people not to commit fraud, not to corrupt money. But again, I think just one person is determined to enrich oneself at the expense of other people, regardless of their flight. Well, there would still be corruption, but we'll see what can be done. What do you think, guys, should be done? Okay, so we have those, and then these are the other. Again, this is an article in 2020, and then they've had Senate hearings as well in 2019. And the main focus of that were the 154 billion. This was what I'm referring to. Ghost patients of WellMed Dialysis and Laboratory Center Corp. That's 154 billion, right? And then we have the undue overpayments under the old case rate scheme. That's what I'm talking about earlier. There's a limit. And even though the value of medical care provided is not really that much, the most healthcare providers still claim, the highest amount that they could claim. Conflict of interest, Duque, yes, the building owned by the family. And then the overpricing in ICT. And then we have the 15 billion in IRM. Sorry, 14 to 15 billion in IRM. Alright. And this is on a larger scale than the congressional pork barrel, which only involved 10 billion. See? That's why they're saying this is, crime of the year, whatever. Wait, again, these are allegations and there have been investigations, but I think I've seen in the financial statements of SSS, they do have receivables from the IRM implementation. Okay. And then there's a mess. Okay, I'll be linking these articles in the description of the video as well, so that you can check them out later on. Alright. Drilon told Morales is the former CEO of PhilHealth, "We are in this mess because of PhilHealth's non-compliance with rules, including a simple COA rule. That is why we have all these problems, because you disregard all the rules designed to protect public funds." Okay. I think that's gross, not really gross negligence, it's a blatant disregard for rules. Alright. No additional cash advances to any official or employee shall be allowed unless previous cash advance has been settled or properly accounted, okay, or liquidated. Right. Okay. Fake COVID cases. This is another thing. There seems to be there are hospitals wherein a patient comes in and he doesn't have COVID, he's therefore a different disease, and yet when he dies because of his other condition, it would be declared as a COVID, and then the hospital would be able to claim, the amount for COVID cases. I'm not sure if these would be the hospital management, or is this in collusion with, the patient's family members? We don't know. Okay, but hopefully, we're urging hospitals, medical institutions, healthcare providers to please don't. Alright? Please be honest. Again, so one of the things that I'll be looking into later on is probably the plight of our healthcare institutions, and see why these things. Why do some of them commit fraud just to get funding from PhilHealth? Okay, and then Duterte issued a directive asking the vice presidents to tender their courtesy resignation, so that supposedly so that PhilHealth could be cleansed, so that the corruption would be curtailed, and that something like a fresh slate, clean slate, so that they can start anew, so that these corruptions would be essentially stopped, because they don't know who really is involved, so they're just saying, let's just replace everyone. Alright, something like that. But that didn't happen again because of there are certain excuses. They cannot do that because certain operations would still have to continue, and removing everyone would affect the operations. But then you can just do it in a staggered manner. Just remove one, replace it with another, and then remove again, replace, until everyone's replaced. Alright. But then there's there's the risk that if it was done that way, then there's a possibility that the corruption could also be transferred or to something like that. Okay, and then we have call for sanctions on PhilHealth execs amid controversy. Essentially, what normally happens is that we have these high-ranking officials, people who are in the highest position in a government agency or government-owned or controlled corporation. And then when a controversy like this happens, the most that happens is that they resign and then they look for another job, normally in the private sector. But from their decision, essentially what only happens is that they lose their job, right? And they, if they lose their job, they probably also lose their benefits, maybe their retirement. But there's a transition naman, transitionary provisions, when a person what they call it, transfers from a government agency to a private company. So there's not much heavy penalty, heavy punishment, or serious punishment that would, in a way, instill it in the minds of these high-ranking officials that if you mess up, you're going to be punished, you're going to be responsible, you're going to be held accountable, and you're going to pay for what you did. Right? It's something like, how about all this money that has been corrupted during your time? You should have who's going to absorb the loss? So hahayaan na lang ba natin na nawala yung pera, or we're not going to recover it anymore? It's just a loss outright. Can we receive it still? It's already gone, and this amount of money could have been used for other better programs, and not corrupted by these people or groups. So the punishment or the sanctions are not that serious, and so these executives do not take their job seriously. You have one who's not aware of what's happening in the department, in the institution. Like, what kind of work are you doing? What kind of supervision or monitoring are you doing if you don't know what's going on in your institution, right? So there's that. And then, of course, you've allowed this corruption to continue, or I'm pretty sure they're aware that there are these things going on, but they choose to ignore it and not do anything to stop these things from happening. So it's just going to continue if no one brought it to our attention, to be honest. I don't think we'll be talking about this if it hasn't come to light, if no one exposed it. So I think there's also the fact that yes, it's a bit difficult, it's a bit it's something hard to do, for one person to go against a culture. Okay, it's already a culture, to be honest. Corruption in certain institutions, it's a culture, it's acceptable. Most people turn a blind eye on these transactions, and yet when there are people who cannot accept these things. What they do is either they whistleblow, or they report, or they resign. One way or another, there are still people who would bring these things to light, to attention, to call the attention of the public that hey, these things are happening, you should all be concerned. Alright, I think it's a good thing for that this came out, but still, it's much better if we can have a resolution and to hold responsible those that should have been, and to find a way to recover all the losses and to ensure that these things do not happen again. Alright? So you can also read this in your own sweet time. And then the official statement by the DOH, mainly Duque, because he's the Secretary of Health, about the PhilHealth. Essentially what I've read is that they're dismissing the allegations as just that, allegations, misinformation, probably fake news, unacceptable, and so I'd rather they do provide explanations, point by point, and then ensure that it's not going to happen. What they did say is, they just claim that they're doing well, that they're managing the fund well. Okay, but still, it's better if they show, be more transparent about the way they operate, the way they handle their finances, so that it would be hard, and also it would be put controls in place that would make it harder for people to commit frauds, right? And then lastly, there's this article from the Science Post. This is quite long, but this discussed quite a lot of topics, so it's going to be a good read as well, so might want to check it out. Alright. Okay, so that's it for this video, and next one would be, we'll be discussing the financial statements of PhilHealth. Alright, so that's it for this one. Thanks and bye. It's a little bit sad because this is the second time I recorded this discussion. Earlier I did a recording and it's over 1 hour, and then the laptop crashed, and when I turned it on again, the recording has been corrupted, and it is so frustrating. So I had to record again, and I've summarized most of the points, so that's why it's shorter than my earlier version. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but that's it. I'm just documenting it, so bye.